Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai, welcome to the Early Childhood Seminar Series. We'll begin our time together with karakia. Me enoi tātou. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa punamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Haumie, huie, tai kie. We're delighted to have you with us today for a presentation by Dr. Daniel Lovatt. In this intriguingly titled seminar, Daniel will be sharing from his doctoral research to explain how children form and develop their working theories and how teachers might foster that formation and development. The recording of this presentation will be available on our Early Childhood Seminar Series YouTube channel after the seminar. Please do use the chat function to connect with each other and the panelists throughout this presentation. And if you have any questions during the presentation that you would like Daniel to respond to at the end, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask them, and Daniel will respond to them at the end of his presentation. I will now pass over to Professor Helen Hedges to welcome and introduce our speaker.
Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and haere mai Daniel. It's my pleasure to introduce Daniel to you this afternoon. Many of you may already know him. Daniel had previous careers to teaching as an electrician and an engineer, which may explain some of his interests in science, technology, engineering and mathematics, aka STEM learning. But he also became the wonderful father to a lovely daughter, Alison, which must be almost 20 years ago now, and became fascinated by the qualities and the extent of young children's learning. As a result, he undertook a graduate diploma in teaching, ECE, and has become an early childhood teacher. So a real change in career. He's taught at several centres, Small Kauri, Mangere Bridge Kindergarten and School of Fish, and is now a curriculum leader at Aotearoa. He undertook his master's thesis, which was also on children's working theories, as part of a teaching and learning research initiative project, and more recently has completed his PhD on supporting children's STEM working theories, and that's what he's speaking about to us today. So, as Justine said, we're all intrigued by this title of Flying Sausages, and we're really invited in and very keen to hear your presentation. So looking forward to hearing from you, Daniel. And just to repeat Justine's request that any questions for Daniel, please pop them in the Q&A and I'll ask them afterwards and listen to Daniel's responses. So over to you, Daniel.
Kia ora, Helen, and kia ora, Justine. And kia ora, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking with a 4-year-old boy in my early childhood centre, Aotearoa, and we were talking about sausages. And I said, perhaps we could cook them using a fire in our sandpit. We talked about sausages needing heat and how the fire would heat up the frying pan. It was a cloudless day, and perhaps Matthew felt the sun's heat on him because he told me that the sun was hot. I said that the sun is hot because it's pretty much like a great big ball of fire. Matthew thought about that for a moment and then shared a working theory with me. We can just throw the sausages up in the air, and when they get close to the sun will cook them. Then when they come back down, we can eat them. He was adamant that we couldn't catch them in our hands as they would be too hot. We'd have to hold out the frying pan and they could land on that. What would you do if a child came up with a working theory like that? How did he develop it, and how would you respond? I'll talk about what we did later. For now, I want to welcome you to this presentation where I'll explain some of my research about working theories, the way they are developed, and how teachers can support their development. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora whānau. Ko te ara huera toko maunga, ko te manukau nukatanga a Aotearoa toko moana, Ko Dennis Lovatt toko mātua. Ko Jeanette Lovatt toko whaia. Ko Taniora Lovatt toko ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa. And just in case you didn't catch all of that, I live in a beautiful but often maligned part of the country, South Auckland. I live on the lower parts of my maunga, Mangere Mountain, and overlook my moana, the beautiful but treacherous Manukau Harbour. My father of Scottish ancestry is Dennis Lovatt, and my mother of Belgian ancestry is Jeanette Lovatt. As Helen said, I come from an electrical engineering background. I did my graduate diploma in ECE in 2008, and since then I've worked in ECE while doing my master's, and last year completed my PhD. I now work in a very wonderful centre called Aotearoa. We're a non-profit centre located on the Green Lane Clinical Centre grounds, where we have a philosophy founded on unconditional love and kindness. I'm the curriculum leader at Aotearoa, and I get to spend 2 days a week in the office and spend the other 3 days in each of our 3 rooms. Helen mentioned my daughter, and there she is in the top left photo, Ali. She's coming up 20 now. In the top right photo, you'll see my beautiful partner, Marissa, and our other daughter, who's also called Ali. And right at the bottom there, you'll see the moanga and the moana. Kia ora te whānau. We've got plenty to cover in the next little while. There are 5 sections to this presentation. First, I'll provide a quick introduction and overview of working theories. Next, I'll explain a perspective on how working theories are developed. I'll then talk about ways that teachers can support working theory development. And then I'll sum up with some thoughts and reflective questions. And finally, all going well, we'll have a short time for questions and discussion. Before I move on, though, I'd like to say a big thank you to a couple of people who've helped me to get to where I am. First, to Professor Helen Hedges, who has been fantastic, kind, encouraging, and challenging. We connected when I did my graduate diploma back in 2008, and she's been supporting me ever since. Thank you, Helen. And also to Dr. Rena Heap, who together with Helen supervised my PhD. Thank you, Rena, for being challenging but encouraging, for critiquing my work but doing it in such a kind and uplifting way. And also to the 2 early childhood centres and the wonderful teachers, the children and families with whom I researched during my PhD. Thank you so much. What are working theories? Well, working theories are the tentative, evolving ideas and understandings that children develop as they use their existing knowledge and understandings to make sense of new information. For instance, young children have pointed out brown cows to me in the past and told me that they are where chocolate milk comes from. To them, and based on their experiences and information, that makes total sense. It is their current working theory. Over time, as they gain further information, they'll most likely revise their working theory. Scientists develop working theories too. Often they don't refer to them as working though and present them as an endpoint. For instance, when I was at school, gravity was presented as a constant that depended on the mass of objects. Only now we have discovered that actually gravity might not be as fixed as previously thought, because scientists have discovered these things called gravitational waves. What was once accepted is now being called into question. So can you see, just as brown cows produce chocolate milk, the experience, the information that scientists had led to their working theory about gravity were drawn on the same kinds of things. But now new information is requiring their theory to be revised. The concept of working theories is based on Te Whāriki's view that children are competent, capable, and creative. Therefore, young children are competent, capable, and creative working theorisers. At first, the concept of working theories appears quite simple. They are evolving ideas and understandings. But if you look a little deeper, the concept is very complex. Think about these aspects of working theories. They are evolving ideas, evolving understandings. They're developed by children, but actually also by adults. The children use their existing knowledge. They are about making sense, and they are a mixture of knowledge, of skills, of attitudes, and in the 1996 version of Te Whāriki, also of strategies and of expectations. Working theories have been recognised as a neglected learning outcome, besides learning dispositions, of Te Whāriki. Yet learning dispositions and working theories are interdependent. For example, if you're curious, you will likely develop working theories about something, and these working theories might make you even more curious. Working theories and learning dispositions can therefore be considered as two sides of the same coin. Before I move on, there are 2 points I want to make. First of all, supporting the development of children's working theories requires skilled teachers. And second, have you noticed that accuracy, or being right, is not mentioned in Te Whāriki? Instead, it is about becoming more capable and competent rather than being conceptually accurate. So why should we focus on working theories? Well, for a start, Helen's done a lot of work on working theories, and she's noted that working theories have connections with broader and more internationally renowned notions such as thinking and knowledge development. At the same time, those notions are not the same. Working theories are more holistic in nature and incorporate physical, linguistic, and social skills, dispositions, and attitudes. And as you might already know, working theories are referenced in our early childhood curriculum, Te Whāriki. They are an overarching learning outcome along with learning dispositions, and they are a specific learning outcome. For example, over time and with guidance and encouragement, children become increasingly capable of making sense of their worlds by generating and refining working theories. So there's a very brief overview of working theories and why they matter. Now let's move on to the development of working theories. In this section, I'll introduce a model that I've created showing how working theories are developed. Then we'll look at a vignette and see how the working theories were formed. So here's a model which I created during my PhD and which I call the spiral of working theory development. Using this model, we start at the bottom and move around in a spiral motion, broadening our working theories. So I want to be clear, we don't start at the top, we start at the bottom. But at the top, you can see the aspects of each circuit or iteration. The model works in this way. First of all, you start with an existing understanding. Next, you engage in or observe an experience, and from this experience, you gain new information. Next, you make connections. That is, you reconcile the new information with your old understanding, and finally, you end up with a revised understanding. I've also shown two slices or iterations of moving around the spiral as a working theory is developed. As we do develop working theories, there will likely be many slices involved. It's important to remember that working theories are not just understandings. They encompass all four aspects of the spiral model: the developing understanding, the experience, the information gained from the experience, and the process of making connections. Remember that working theories are not just thoughts. They also involve knowledge, skills, attitudes, strategies, and expectations. So let's think of the spiral in terms of the sausages. We could say that Matthew started with an understanding that sausages need heat to cook. The experience involved talking with me about heating sausages. He took some information that the sun is hot and like a big ball of fire, similar to a normal fire, and made connections. The sun can cook a sausage. His revised understanding was that we could cook a sausage if we could get the sausage up towards the sun by throwing it. Again, I want to emphasize Matthew's working theory involves all four aspects of this model: understanding, experience, information gained, connections made, and that revised understanding. Next, I'd like to show you a vignette from my research. This vignette comes from a centre where I carried out research during my PhD, and due to ethical requirements, I can't name the centre or the children or teachers, but to provide a little context, it is a privately run centre in Auckland with a very diverse mix of children and teachers. It is mixed age, meaning that all the children from 6 months to 5 years are together throughout the day. In my research, I videoed the children and often was involved to some extent in what was going on. In this instance, some children were standing under the climbing frame, which you can see in the picture there, trying to reach the bars. They tried stretching, standing on their toes, then jumping. But while some could touch the bar, no one could hold on to it. Next, they tried running down that nearby hill and jumping, but it still didn't help. Then they noticed the foam wedges and decided to try them out. The following vignette shows a very small part of the experience. That seemingly simple experience covers multiple curriculum areas and working theories about many domains, such as maths with geometry and distance, science with speed and force, relationships with turn-taking and encouragement, empowerment with the children taking responsibility for their learning, and I could just keep going on. Let's have a look though at Frank's working theories about jumping from the wedge. Let's start with his initial understanding. The wedge will help me reach the bars. He adds experience to his understanding by actually just giving it a go. And from his first attempt, he finds that there is more to it than he first thought. He gains new information. The wedge wobbled when he landed higher up on it. He makes connections by reconciling that new information he has gained with his existing understandings. And his revised understanding is that he can't jump from everywhere on the wedge, but he's not satisfied. Hopefully you heard him say, I need to try again. So Frank's revised understanding becomes the beginning of iteration 2. Now Frank has an understanding that he can't jump from anywhere on the wedge. So he tries again and jumps from a little lower and gains new information. The wedge was steadier. Again, he reconciles that new information and forms a further revised understanding that he can use the wedge, but he can't jump from the top. And I expect this repeats many, many times as he hones that working theory. In this case, the physical experience supported the development of working theories that were becoming conceptually accurate, even though Frank likely could not explain what his working theories were. As I've seen in other circumstances, though, physical experiences can also support working theories to be less conceptually accurate. At one stage, I recorded a teacher helping a child balance a ruler upright. The child was trying to tape the bottom of the ruler to a wooden base, but the ruler kept tipping over. The teacher helped to hold the ruler upright, but was distracted by another child just as the first child applied a piece of tape onto the top of the ruler. The ruler then stayed upright because the teacher was still holding it and hadn't noticed that the child had placed the tape at the top. That child looked confused at first, but he continued to put tape on the top of the ruler, showing that he had developed a working theory that the position of the tape was critical to keeping the ruler upright. That part's right, but conceptually, he was totally inaccurate. Placing a piece of tape on the top of the ruler is not going to help it stay upright. But his working theory fitted the experience and the information gained from the experience. So take a moment now to think about the children you were teaching and learning with today. When you think about their working theory development, can you apply the spiral of working theory? Do the children in your centre take the information gained from experiences, reconcile it with their existing understandings, and then form revised understandings? I'll just give you a moment to ponder about that. Okay, let's move on. So a key thought, or actually it's a couple of key thoughts. In Te Whāriki, accurate ideas and concepts, and therefore accurate working theories, are not necessarily the aim. Instead, developing working theories is about broadening ideas and concepts, adding new ideas into existing theories, and adding depth to understandings, even if they're not accurate. So then what's the teacher's role? In Te Whāriki, it is very clear that the development and support of working theories are highly valued. Here's what it says. It is expected that kaiako will prioritise the development of children's working theories because these enable learning across the whole curriculum. We are required to support children's working theory development, but how might we do that? In this next section, I'll explain one way teachers can foster, support, and enrich children's working theories. I want to be very clear though, this is not a list of techniques or strategies. Instead, I'm offering a model which can act as a framework for you to develop your own strategies and techniques that work best for your children and in your centre. So through my PhD research, I developed a model which I call the Shared Learning Commitments Model, or the SLC, which presents a framework that can be used to support the development of working theories. The Shared Learning Commitment Model involves 4 aspects. Similar to the Spiral of Working Theories model, it starts with an understanding aspect. The understanding aspect is threefold. It includes understanding the child, what their interests are, what their previous experiences are, and how to engage them in learning. It also involves understanding the concept that children are developing working theories about, and understanding the child's understanding of the concept. Then using those understandings, the teacher can provide an intentional and potentially meaningful experience for the child. The teacher then draws on their understandings to select and make information visible in or from that experience that they think will be meaningful to the child. And finally, the teacher works with the child to prompt, support, or provoke them to make connections between the new information and their current understandings, potentially resulting in new understandings and enriched working theories. Together, these 4 aspects form the shared learning commitment. You'll notice that I use the word potentially a lot here because we can never be sure or certain that what we do is actually going to lead to learning. So let's have a look at this model in relation to the wedge jumping and what could have happened if the teacher was focused on the potential science and maths learning opportunities. Before I do that though, I'd like to be clear that this is not a criticism in any way of her teaching. The teacher was focused on the turn-taking and sharing going on and was closely aware of the social aspects of learning that was happening, but choosing not to become directly involved as the children were managing themselves very capably. From the teacher's perspective, she was focused on the social emotional aspects of learning. But let's think about it from a science and maths perspective. I think the learning going on in the wedge jumping was amazing. From a theoretical perspective, when looking at the science and maths learning that was happening, we could say that the experience was constructivist or Piagetian. From a science or mathematical perspective, we could say that the children were expected to develop working theories themselves with no input from the teacher, but based purely on the experience that they were having together with resources. However, from a socio-cultural view, the teacher could have become involved in the learning with the children. A teacher could have wondered aloud about aspects they understood to be meaningful to Frank, who was great at wondering and theorising. They could have put words to the action scene and then supported Frank to develop working theories about what was happening. Let's apply the SLC model to see what could have occurred. First, let's consider Frank. Frank is a very hands-on learner who likes to verbalise his thinking. He enjoys discussing and negotiating with friends and teachers. He is quick to explain his viewpoint, but will consider alternative views. Next, let's consider some understandings about the process of jumping from the wedge. The process can be viewed from a scientific perspective and particularly from a physics perspective. There are complex factors involved here about force, velocity, balance, and pivot points, which could be drawn out through vector lines, something I remember doing in my sixth form physics class. While I'm certainly not advocating for the teacher to sit Frank down and then model their actions through vectors, the teacher could choose to become involved in ways that are meaningful to Frank. Finally, we consider Frank's understandings. He understood that the wedge could help him reach the bar. He seemed to understand that some running was required and therefore motion was needed. These understandings then allow us to move into the first aspect of the SLC, that is, to intentionally provide a potentially meaningful experience. In this case, knowing that Frank is a verbal, hands-on learner, the teacher might choose that the intentional experience is to engage in a conversation about what is going on when Frank runs and jumps. In that conversation, they might make some of what Frank is physically experiencing visible. For instance, they might say, I noticed that the higher up you land on the wedge, the more likely it is to tip over. Depending on the ensuing conversation, the teacher might make connections. For instance, they might link it to a seesaw. I wonder if it's like a seesaw, like when a child sits on a seesaw and one end goes up. When you land on the wedge, it's like one end goes up, but only if you land higher. There are many other possibilities, and as you know, there are many, many ways that this might turn out. Perhaps the teacher might make a seesaw. Perhaps they might get an old-fashioned weigh scale out. And who knows, perhaps they might even end up drawing vectors. I hope you can see then that the SLC can be used as a framework to support the development of working theories. Take a moment now to think back about times when you've supported children to form and develop working theories. Does the SLC model help you to unpack what you did? Could it support you to foster a child's working theories tomorrow? I'll give you a moment. Okay, let's go back to the sausages. Earlier, we used the spiral of working theory development to unpack the development of Matthew's working theory. Remember, he started with an understanding that sausages need heat to cook. He engaged in an experience, which was talking with me about heating sausages. He took some information from that experience that the sun is hot and like a big ball of fire, similar to a normal fire, and he made connections. The sun can cook a sausage. His revised understanding was that we could cook a sausage by throwing it up to the sun. Now let's apply the SLC model to Matthew's flying sausage working theory development. From an SLC perspective, first we need to think about understandings. One important thing I understand about Matthew is that he likes nonsense, which thankfully is mentioned in Te Whāriki. We often talk about creative and ridiculous things, and it is something he's drawn to. He's very good at explaining himself and his ideas, and he seems to often think things through aloud. I'm really interested in science, so I have a pretty good understanding of the concepts involved of heating, cooking, how we throw, the effects of gravity, the energy needed to leave the atmosphere of Earth, of orbits, travel through space, and the effects of a vacuum. I know that Matthew has basic understandings of some, but not all of these concepts. In this instance, our continuing conversation was the intentional experience that I provided. In that conversation, I made some information available by talking about the sun being a ball of fire, similar to the fire that we might make in the sandpit. Through the nature of our conversation, which was largely about wondering about possibilities, Matthew made connections. So the question I have is how could I use the SLC model now to support further working theory development? What intentional experiences could I provide? Have my understandings about Matthew, the concept, and Matthew's understanding of the concept changed? Could the intentional experience be throwing some sausages? Maybe we could work out a way of measuring their temperature. Perhaps we could go up our nearby maunga and throw them from the top of it, as it would be closer to the sun. Maybe we could look at some videos about rockets, the design involved, and the energy they require to leave the Earth. Perhaps we could get a globe and use that to help investigate the idea of gravity. Maybe we could find some books about space. Maybe we could just light a fire and cook the sausages and see what working theories come from that. Perhaps we should get in contact with someone from Rocket Labs or go to the observatory. Maybe Rocket Labs would send us a sausage into space. What might you do? Again, importantly, I want to reinforce that SLC is not a list of strategies or techniques, but provides a framework to understand ways that we can work with children to support their working theory development. And actually, since our original discussion about flying sausages, there have been further developments. More recently, I noticed Matthew throwing a ball, and we talked about the sausages again. I asked him what would happen if he threw the ball up towards the sun. Matthew replied that it would turn into ash. Here I want to stop just for a moment to highlight the importance of revisiting working theories over time. Sometimes it seems that our children need to go home and ponder, or just let it sit, and then come back another day with revised understandings and working theories ready to revise them further. The SLC fits that. This is a shared learning commitment. That means we're committed to sharing that learning. It doesn't mean it has to be in one instance. It can be over a prolonged period of time. But just a few days ago, I talked with Matthew's dad about his flying sausages working theories. And his dad, who clearly likes nonsense too, asked Matthew how he would get it up as high as the sun. While Matthew was thinking about that, his dad suggested climbing a mountain, but Matthew had a better idea. We can get in an airplane, and then when it's up high, we can throw the sausages up to the sun and then catch them while we're in the airplane. But we can't eat them at first because they will be too hot. Matthew had a grin on his face, and I still can't work out if he's serious or if we are developing nonsense working theories together. Later still, we talked about flying sausages in a group. Matthew talked again about throwing them from an aeroplane, this time saying he would catch them in a bowl while they cooled down. At my suggestion, the children tried throwing balls as high as they could. I suggested we could take them up our local maunga, which we can see from our centre, and try them from up there. Frank said he didn't even think we could throw them as high as the clouds, and instead pointed out a nearby tall chimney, saying we could probably throw them that high. I then introduced the concept of gravity and talked about how gravity means that if we throw anything up, that it will get pulled back down to earth. We talked about how we get pulled back to the ground when we jump, or back onto anything that's between us and the earth. The children then experimented by standing on boxes and ladders, and at first jumping off, but then later stepping off. There was a lot of talk about gravity. Somehow the discussion moved on to the moon, and I talked about how the moon orbits the earth and held up a plate and ball which happened to be on the ground next to us, and showed the children that the moon goes around the earth, and that if it wasn't for gravity, the moon would just shoot off into outer space. After some discussion about this, I then introduced that we actually orbit the sun. However, I think that was a step too far for the children to grasp at that time. I do expect to come back to it later though. We talked about how, if there was no gravity, that everything would just float around like how we see astronauts when they're in spaceships. Matthew then went around the spiral of working theory development again and decided we would be better if we went in a spaceship into space and threw the sausages to the sun from the spaceship. I hope you can see that there are multiple working theories being developed by many children involved and that they go anywhere and everywhere. And one of the purposes of the SLC being a framework is that it's not with an intended outcome other than broadening and supporting the development of working theories in whatever way they happen to go. So as the flying sausages working theories have continued to develop, Matthew has gone around complete circuits of the spiral of working theory development, while I have gone around circuits of the SLC model many times. The two models are intertwined. In fact, we could almost say they synergize. If you pay careful attention to your children as they move through the four aspects of the spiral model, you can form deeper understandings of the children themselves, the way that they learn, and deeper understandings of their understandings. If you do so, your understandings yourself will be deeper, meaning that there is a higher potential for the intentional experiences you provide, for the information you select to make visible, and for the way you prompt connections to be made to result in deeper and broader working theories being developed by the child. Understanding how working theories are developed will help you to understand how to support that development. The spiral of working theory development model provides a means of doing so. The SLC model provides a framework for you to work within to support the development of young children's working theories. But it is not a checklist or a fixed set of strategies and techniques which must be followed. Instead, it is up to you and your teams to think, wonder, discuss, trial, and evaluate strategies and techniques within these models that work best for you, your children, and your teachers. In the examples I've provided, discussion and dialogue with the children was central to the aspects of the SLC. However, there are many other ways, such as inviting other children to share their thoughts, to provide resources and materials, to alter the environment, and other such ways that might provide alternative, disruptive, or provoking thoughts and ideas to the working theories that the children hold. Understanding is the centre and a critical aspect of the SLC model. How are you going to understand your children, their understandings, and the concepts they are developing working theories? So perhaps tonight, or maybe tomorrow, for one child in your centre, have a think about the things that they are developing working theories about. Can you use the spiral model to better understand how they are developing those working theories? Then think about how you might use the SLC model to support, foster, and enrich their working theories. What strategies and techniques within each aspect might you use tomorrow and the day after? I encourage you to think about how these two models can support you to foster children's working theory development. And I also encourage you to let me know your thoughts and your working theories about how these models might help you support that development. Let me know. I'll end this presentation with some further reading and information here. In particular, Helen's blog on working theories. And at the bottom, you'll see, here's my email. Let me know your working theories about these models. Thanks everyone for listening today. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Daniel. Thank you so much. You've given everyone a great deal to think about, and there are some interesting comments and questions starting to come through, and they may be added to as we talk some more. I think that you've given us two really great examples throughout the presentation that have really helped in the application of what you're talking about in relation to your models. And the video was really powerful for doing that too. So I guess that's the first question that has come through from one of the participants, Fiona. The wedge example, the Frank example, is an example of something you've observed as opposed to something that a child has said. So I guess there's often, the assumption that working theories are things that children say, when of course with infants and toddlers in particular, they're not. They do need to be observed. So the question is then, what are you thinking about that is implied in the judgments that you're making? I think your shared learning commitments model talked about knowing a child. There may be some other things there, but what goes on in a teacher's mind, the teacher's role question that you asked about how they interpret working theories that a child is not yet verbalising?
Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Helen. It's a tricky thing, isn't it? Because we can't, and actually we probably don't want to open up a child's head to see what's actually going on in their brain. So at the best of times, these are subjective judgments that we are making that are informed based on our understandings and relationships and knowing the child. On top of that, I think if you can bring an understanding of how working theories are developed, along with your understanding of the child, then you have a better informed way of actually interpreting what they are experiencing and possibly forming working theories about. At the end of the day, we can never say for certain that this is exactly what is going on. Mm-hmm. And that is the nature of early childhood, and one of the great things about it, I think. There is never an experience where we say, oh yeah, I'm very sure that you learned this. But we will come up with, through analysis, I've talked with teachers, shown a lot of teachers the video. And I guess I had a bit of a privileged position because I wasn't teaching, and in that moment of having to keep an eye on other things that were going on, I was fully involved in the moment. And that's a privilege, and I guess it also makes me think that we need to look at how we might get to those privileged positions too, where we can be engrossed in those moments, where we can be subjectively trying to understand as best as we can what's going on.
Yes, thank you. That's actually responded almost to one of the comments that's come through about how do we ensure we have the time to engage with children in these ways. And you've partly answered that by saying, teachers need to look at their different roles and responsibilities. Do you want to make any further comments on that, since you raised it yourself as well?
Well, I experienced that issue myself, teaching, and the multiple demands that are going on teachers' time and attention, who we are actually connecting with in terms of children, what we're doing, what we're required to do. I always think, try to make those moments happen. Look for potential. I think of simple things, like changing a nappy with a child. But take that away from being a technical exercise and make that a moment of connection and understanding and relationship building. I think we can do that with many other things that are going on during the day, meal times, when we're out and about, without it being a safety risk or supervision risk. Let's just reconsider what we might be able to do there.
I remember when you and I have talked about this too. We've talked about the importance of team members being aware of what each other is doing, so that there is the opportunity then to see when a teacher is really engaged with a group of children and ensure that they are given the opportunity to continue. Yeah, so yes, it goes beyond that individual to the team of teachers, doesn't it? That's
right. Being aware and also appreciating what is going on in those interactions.
Yeah. There is a question that's come up that one participant thinks that the models you've talked about sound a bit like Piaget's theory, yet of course you said that your work is underpinned by sociocultural theory. So I just wondered if, because you've just presented as a snippet in a way, if you just might want to comment on that, because, just comment on that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that would be the way that the spiral is perceived. That the spiral came about from John Dewey's work, the American theorist back in the early 1900s. And he came up with the spiral of knowledge, and much later on, Gordon Wells adapted that into the spiral of knowing. And effectively, I've taken that and built on that and put that into a working theories perspective. So yes, definitely, when you consider the theory involved behind developing working theories, at the end of the day, what happens, I think, is that there are connections formed in the brain. So it is an individual construction of knowledge and understandings. But really importantly for us, that's happening in a socio-cultural setting. So while that knowledge is happening inside your head, it is being influenced by many things that are going on in the setting, including teachers, children, the environment, the culture, everything that's going on there leads to that. So I'm not saying in any way to think of this as okay, I'm going to stand back with my arms folded and just let it happen. And I guess this is why I'm saying the SLC synergizes here, because this is where the socio-cultural aspect comes in, of sitting down or standing with a child, having those discussions, bringing out different points of view through those discussions or through resources and materials that just make children think, I wonder if there's something more to what I understood.
Yeah, lovely. And if anybody really wants to know too, your master's was very much looking at both Piaget and Vygotskian ideas, so could always go back to that to see the difference in how you think about that. Just moving on to the shared learning commitments model then, it certainly seemed in the way that you were working around it that spoke about analysing the working theories and planning for them and considering multiple possibilities. So there's a question here from Barbara. Am I right thinking that a key part of a teacher's role in supporting developing working theories is to find ways to keep children engaged in the inquiry rather than interrupting or hijacking it?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. And this is something that we've talked about, is hijacking children's thinking and interfering and actually just stopping what was going on. And I think that's a critical part of what we do. And I also think we need to acknowledge that there are times when we're going to do that with our best intentions. Sometimes we just don't get it, and we don't understand exactly what's going on. But at the heart of it, I think, is that the understanding aspect, which is the centre of the SLC. If we can understand our children, then we can understand how we can bring in some kind of influence that helps them strengthen or broaden their working theories. And that those understandings come about through time and through relationships. And again, it's a difficult thing in a busy centre, and it's something to reconsider. How are you going to develop those strong and deep relationships that bring about deep understandings that then enable the meaningful interactions that don't actually interfere or hijack that thinking?
Yeah, personally, I found children are very quick to tell us when we get their ideas wrong or
That's right.
take it in another direction too. So yeah, once we're treating children as competent and capable, it all just happens. And another participant, Kerry's, agreed that revisiting working theories is really important for fostering their development. And again, you've given us such a lovely example with the flying sausages, that title presentation. I'm really looking forward to you getting in touch with Rocket Lab to organise this sausage being launched. We're all going to be waiting on that with bated breath. Daniel, at one point you posed the question about what is a teacher's role, and one thing that you've talked about but you didn't say was part of the role is to actually have some of the knowledge behind it. And that really came through in your ability to support the theories you talked about because of the STEM knowledge that you brought. So I just wondered if you wanted to comment on that in terms of a teacher or a team of teachers, what kinds of knowledge from content knowledge perspective might a team be looking for amongst them?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Again, I don't have a definite answer here, and I guess it's about posing some possibilities. A theme that came through in my research was that STEM is everywhere. And that kind of sounds good at the beginning. It's like, oh, yeah, great, but we can bring it in anywhere. But actually, how do you bring that in everywhere? How do you have that knowledge about every aspect of what's going on during the day in all the curriculum areas? You just can't know everything about everything. One of the keys, though, for me is that, and I don't want to downplay knowledge, because the content knowledge is really important, because the more we know, I think the more we find out that we don't know, and the more we can engage. But at the same time, we don't have to beat ourselves up that we don't know everything about everything. The key is that we are interested, that we're engaged and authentic in these relationships and interactions, and we want to learn, and we want to find out, and we wonder and we ponder together, and we might not reach the right place. I mean, you can't open a spaceship window and throw a sausage out, which I imagine is what the thinking might be right now. That doesn't matter, actually. These are about big connections and bringing big ideas together for children to just think outside what we would think of as the box. And that's the important thing. We want creative thinkers who hopefully will hold some content knowledge at the same time that we might be able to bring. But we have to acknowledge that we can't bring content knowledge about everything.
Yeah, no, I think you've answered that really well too, and highlighting that it's actually those like the learning dispositions of curiosity and inquiry that sit alongside working theories that are what we're looking to support children to develop. And yes, sometimes if you don't have the knowledge, you can go along with their creative thinking as well. And perhaps we're all looking forward to seeing it's gone from the Maunga to the aeroplane to the rocket ship. Maybe there's something else that Matthew's going to come out with that's going to get that sausage closer to the sun next time you're talking to him. So yes, look, thank you, Daniel, so much. Your presentation has been really authentically focused on children's ideas and thinking, and I think everyone who's been here today has really, really enjoyed that, and you'll see in the comments later that that's the case. I think you've also reminded us all that there's a lot of joy to be had in this learning alongside each other, because we're not looking for necessarily accurate conceptual understandings, but developing the kinds of skills, knowledge and attitudes, etc., that will foster children's working theories and then eventually lead them to that kind of generative knowledge. I think too, you've epitomised the qualities that, just to say there's a lot of teachers, head teachers, PLD providers and teacher educators amongst the participants today. And that made me just think that, yes, you are epitomising the qualities that we try to bring out in our teacher education graduates in terms of being highly reflective and constantly open to learning. And that made me just look up very quickly John Dewey's 3 dispositions that he said were vital in reflection were open-mindedness, responsibility and wholeheartedness. And that's really come through in your presentation. So I want to thank you very much for what you've offered to everyone today. There's lots of thank yous coming through in the chat, and I'm sure that people will want to revisit the YouTube presentation when it's up so that they can get their heads around those two models a little bit more and be able to think about what you posed, what are the takeaways, what are the things that people are going to do differently in their teaching and learning practices as a result of being at your presentation. So thank you very much. And I'll hand back to Justine to close the seminar.
Thank you, Helen. And thank you, Daniel, for sharing with us this evening. There's nothing I personally love more than hearing stories of teachers' practice and children's learning. And as indicated by the questions and discussion your presentation has generated, there's a great deal of interest from early childhood kaiako in understanding how children form working theories, and also a huge desire from kaiako to develop their own strategies and techniques to foster, support and extend children's working theories in their own contexts and settings. So I'm sure that this seminar will act as a provocation for teachers to go back into their own settings this week and look with new eyes at the working theories children are developing and to consider how they can support those. So ngā mihi nui ki a koe. Thank you. To our early childhood seminar series audience, if you do want to share or revisit this fascinating presentation, please do check out our early childhood seminar series YouTube channel. The recording of this seminar will be available in a couple of days. And we look forward to seeing you all back for our next seminar in September. So keep an eye on your inbox for the flyer and the registration information. Thank you again, Daniel, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Kia tautura me Mārie, ki runga i ngā iwi o te ao. Let your peace reign on all the people of the world. Kia kaha, kia ora, kia ata whai, ka kite anō.